Today we are going to be talking about something that you have experienced at some point in your life. It doesn't matter really how you grew up, what you believe right now, or what kind of family you grew up in. You have experienced this at some point in your life. It's this: discouragement. And I don't know if you've noticed this like me, but I've noticed that it's way easier to fall into discouragement than it is to climb back out of it. Well, all of these things and more we are going to be talking about today with Pastor Eric and the rest of our locations as we continue in our series, The Banner of Jesus. Thank you for being here today, and welcome to SMCC Online.
Hey, I want to talk about something today, really just one thing that we have all experienced. It doesn't matter what you might believe about Christianity or church, this is something that we all have in common. We all go through seasons of discouragement, and I want to talk about discouragement now. Discouragement is a word that means to take away enthusiasm. It really means to be in a state where we've sort of lost sight of the pace that we used to have, a state where we're unable to move forward with the same pace, enthusiasm, or courage that we are used to. And when things are discouraging, it is tempting to want to stop trying, to stop caring, and even to stop hoping. And here's the thing, there's a lot to be discouraged about right now. And surely in your life, there is something that's probably discouraging you. It might be politics or finances or friendship or family or your health or cultural trends that you are seeing in our world, or perhaps you're discouraged by church. Maybe you're even discouraged with God. I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about discouragement. Some of you, you're not just a little discouraged, you are very discouraged. You tuned in today because you saw this title and you thought, man, I got to give it at least a listen. It is easy to get into this spot. I've noticed this. It is far easier to fall into discouragement than it is to get out of it. And so when we're discouraged, we should just remember it's actually a universal thing. We've all felt this. It's universal, it's harmful, it's something that can be so defeating, it can be so distracting. At times it can lead us to fatigue, it can lead us to frustration, it can lead us into fear, it can lead us into a sense of failure. Now, in my own life, as I was preparing for today, I thought of 3 major seasons where I felt discouraged as well. Many years ago, a family member who I love deeply knocked on my door out of the blue. It was an out of the blue knock, and I knew something was wrong, and I opened the door, and there they were in tears, and they began to share about how their relationship with another family member that I absolutely love deeply was unraveling at the seams. They began to go into all the conflict, all the pain, all the hurt, even some abuse that had happened, and I could do nothing about it. I felt oh so helpless. I wanted things to get better, but I didn't know how to move in that direction or move them in that direction. I listened, but it put me into a season of discouragement. I was discouraged. I can think of another season where some people had some opinions about me. They were upset with me. And by the way, that happens. It happens a lot, actually. And the problem with this, though, is they were starting to share those thoughts, their upset opinions with others. And I wasn't able to speak into it. I wasn't able to listen. I wasn't able to own the things that I needed to own or maybe correct or provide some perspective. And in that moment, as those opinions were starting to spread, I felt oh so alone, isolated, and I was discouraged. I can think of another season at work where there were a lot of problems that needed to be solved. There were people that needed my attention, people that needed my care, and I couldn't keep up with it all. I felt so frustrated that I couldn't solve these problems. I couldn't carry the weight of it all. It put me into a season of discouragement. Let me tell you how we get there. Discouragement sets in when things take longer than expected, when things are harder than expected, when we are more alone than we expected, when we can't help a solution like we would expect. When all of this happens, we feel discouraged. Now, If you've ever been around religion, if you've even thought about spirituality in seasons of discouragement, it can just add on to the weight of discouragement. Because perhaps in religion you heard this, God can get you out of it. And so you started doing the things that the church religious leaders told you to do. You started doing the things and taking these steps and serving and giving and praying and doing all the things that you were told to do so that God would just lift you right out of that pit of discouragement. And yet he didn't. And so you sat there thinking, God, where are you? Because I'm still discouraged. In these moments, it's just important to remember that if you think God's just there to get you out of it quickly, perhaps you are believing a hangover lie from the prosperity gospel that says God's out to make your life prosperous. There's this lie out there that says this, Jesus is really with you, when life is really going well. But this is not what Jesus is really like. So I want to talk today about his heart towards the discouraged, his heart towards us when we're discouraged, his heart towards you and me, perhaps even now. So this is part 2 of a very important series that we've been going through, studying the heart or the character of Jesus and studying his heart towards us. We're asking the question, what is Jesus like really? And today we want to talk about what his heart is really like towards the discouraged. And an image that we're using to really make sense of who Jesus is this image of a banner. The series is called The Banner of Jesus. We want to know what his banner is like, what his flag is like, and what it means to live under the banner of Jesus. In ancient culture, and we talked about this last week, but just to remind you, in ancient culture, a banner, or essentially a flag, was flown to symbolize something that was core to a group of people, something about their identity, who they submitted to as their authority, who they served with purpose. A flag would demonstrate all of that. It would help people see an authority and an identity and an activity that they would live out. And it's still a bit like this. I mean, if you go to an RSL game, you will see some flags flying high that let you know who these fans are really cheering for. In ancient culture, a flag meant you were fighting for someone. It meant someone was fighting for you. And we see this in the Old Testament. And I want to turn your attention today as we begin to establish this theme to Psalm 60. In Psalm 60, we see this, Psalm 60, verse 4. But for those who fear you, really those who trust you, bow the knee to you, live in awe and reverence of you, you have raised a banner. You've lifted the flag. You've raised a banner to be unfurled against the bow. Some interesting language, but imagine you're in battle. And as the battle rages on and things start to get tense, the flag is unveiled. The flag is unleashed. It's flying high. It means your leader, your king, your commander is there to fight on your behalf. And just that sense of their presence gives strength in the battle. The type of strength that would bring fear into the enemy, the type of strength that would push back the bows that are aimed at you. This is the language behind this wonderful psalm. And this is the Lord as a banner. And so we're talking about what it means to live with Jesus under his banner. To know what he is really like, we need to know what he is like towards the discouraged. That might be you now, it might be you soon. And here's the reality. Jesus is close to the brokenhearted. He's close to us when life is falling apart. It's actually core to who he is. I want to show you that now, and I want to set it up with a little bit of background. In the first century, Jesus' followers found themselves very, very discouraged. I mean, the world around them, the Roman culture around them, the Jewish culture around them, it was very hostile towards them. And so they're experiencing persecution and pain and suffering. They are scared, they are hurting, they are bleeding out, and they are dying. They are oh so discouraged. Remember, discouragement sets in when things are harder than expected. And surely for them, following after Jesus, their God of love, their Savior and Messiah, was going in a way that they didn't see coming. I mean, they wanted to follow after him and enter into his rest, and all of a sudden persecution was upon them. So things were harder than expected, and they were discouraged. We get discouraged when things take longer than expected. They knew that Jesus was going to come back someday, come back for them, come back to rescue them and establish his kingdom with them, and yet he hadn't yet. He still hasn't. And when things take longer than expected, it can produce discouragement. So the author of a New Testament book, the author of Hebrews, writes to these discouraged Christians to help them along, to bring hope and to bring encouragement to the discouraged. And in chapter 4 of the book of Hebrews, we see a section that really serves as a remedy to discouragement. And I want you to see that now, because this was the remedy in the first century. And if you're a Jesus follower and you're discouraged now, it is a remedy in your century as well. And so I want us to turn to Hebrews 4. We're going to study this passage together slowly to see what the author had in mind to help these discouraged Jesus followers. We're going to pick it up in verse 14. So Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14, an author, really a pastor, writing to encourage a discouraged group of people. And the author begins like this: "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess." This section starts with a therefore. And usually a therefore refers back to something else that came before it. But in this sentence structure, the therefore is really described with what comes next. Therefore, since we have all this, since we've trusted this, since this person is our representative, then let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. I don't know if you've ever been in a discouraged season before. It is easy to want to drop the faith that we profess, turn back from it, or give it up, deconstruct it all. And surely Christians were thinking, this is too hard, this is too difficult. I'm wondering if I should let go of my faith in Jesus. And the author of Hebrews says, no, no, no. In the midst of discouragement, the solution is not to give up what it is you believe, it's to hold firmly to it because of all that Jesus is. And that's what he's going to explain here as he talks about how to get out of discouragement. And as he does this, he describes who Jesus is. He describes Jesus as a representative of his people. In ancient culture, a king often represented God to people. It was a priest who represented the people to God. And in the book of Hebrews, the author is letting us know what type of representative Jesus actually is. He's not like a priest or a religious leader who stands distant and says, you need to get better if you want to get close to me. He's not the type of priest who stands distant and above and says, you should be better by now. He's the type of priest who is as close as your closest friend. That's what the author of Hebrews is describing. He's saying he's the one that can bring you through this. Therefore, since we have a priest like this, one who understands, he's going to unpack this in just a little bit, we have a reason to hold fast to the faith. Now, I want you to take note. The faith, that definite article, T-H-E before faith, lets us know that even in the first century, there was an authoritative, marked off by a boundary approach to biblical Christianity. Core doctrine is really what he's talking about when he talks about the faith. Hold firmly to those truths in the midst of this season of discouragement. Now, before we press on, we got to unpack something that's core to this pastor, this author of the book of Hebrews, as he pastors his people. It was core to his thinking. It should be core to ours. And it's really this right here. He knows this. If you want to change your feeling, change your thinking. If you want to change your feeling, change your thinking. This is built into the argument of the book of Hebrews. They were feeling discouraged, they were feeling defeated, they were feeling down, and the author of Hebrews writes to them to bring them through it, and he does so by helping them think clearly about who Jesus is. And in our culture today, our culture usually is built just the opposite of this. It's feel first, and then maybe think second. This is the opposite of biblical Christianity. It's opposite of a biblical worldview that says think first and allow your feelings to follow. See, our feelings, they are a wonderful gauge. They are not a great guide. They are wonderful in reporting how we're doing and responding to something. They are not a good ruler of our lives. When we feel first and think second, we will find ourselves making some foolish decisions, like me 2 weeks ago. The family, the Nelsons, we were in the car, we were driving to Nora's soccer game, and the traffic was horrendous, okay? And so my wife, she's so smart, she says, hey, open up the map, open up Waze, and let Waze take you on the quickest path. Waze, It's pretty good, but I was gonna feel my way there faster, all right? So Waze says, hey, take this exit. I'm like, no, that doesn't feel like the fastest way. I feel, and I said this, I feel like this lane's gonna be our fast lane. So I head over to the carpool lane, and Waze is like, exit here, and I pass the exit. It's like, okay, exit here if you wanna get there quicker. I'm like, babe, I'm gonna let my feelings guide us there. We're gonna get there faster. Guess what? We actually never made it to her soccer game because my feelings, they were not an accurate guide for my life. I should have followed the good thinking of another, not my feelings and where we were headed. Look, when we are discouraged, it puts this weight on us that makes it even harder to think clearly. See, this is what happened when we were on the freeway. I was frustrated. The kids were yelling in the back seat. They were fighting. I couldn't think clearly. I didn't know if I wanted to follow the app, and I just wanted to follow my feelings. And when we're in that situation, we must pause and we must go about it differently, thinking before feeling. What I've noticed in our world is that when people are discouraged, their feelings are hurting, they think the way to get out of this is to feel more pleasurable things. So I have feelings I don't like. So to balance this out and counteract this, I will add more feelings into my life that I do like. But this just puts us on a pleasure pursuit. And if we're on a pleasure pursuit, typically what I've noticed is it only adds more pain, more desperation, and more hurt into the picture. And so then we only have more negative emotion, more negative feeling, and we think, well, I just have to have more good feelings in my life. And this is a snowball that leads people to a place where they don't know how to get out. If the author of Hebrews was here, he would say, stop that. Begin with good thinking. Think on true thoughts and allow your emotions to follow. Because when you do, you will walk further away from lies. You will walk closer to truth. And when you live your life aligned with truth, listen, it feels good. So, this is what the author has in mind. And so with all of this in mind, he continues in Hebrews chapter 4 to talk about the type of thinking these people, and by extension us, if you're a Jesus follower, should have. So we'll pick it up in verse 15 now. He says this, and he begins to describe the heart of Jesus. We do not have a high priest who's unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. The author of Hebrews says if you want to think about who Jesus is, you want to contemplate and reflect on who he is, here's what he's like. He can empathize with you. He knows what it's like to go through discouragement, to go through what you're going through, and he is with you in the midst of it. Now, the word for tempted here is also the word for tested. It's the word for tested. And the point he's making is this: everything that comes in front of us to draw us away to rebellion towards Jesus, Jesus was tested with too. He's making that point here. He was tempted or tested in every way as we are, yet he did not sin. When we say yes to that tempting rebellion, when we say yes to that test, Jesus said no to it. So he's perfect, and he understands what it is like to go through what we're going through. In English, the word is translated empathize. In Greek, it's actually much closer to the word sympathize. And it's this word. It means co-sufferer, co-sufferer. Now, in English, when we use empathize, that's what we really mean. Someone who will jump into the well with us, someone who can suffer with us. In the Greek language, sympathize really had that same connotation. And I can remember this in our own life. When I saw this clearly, we had Nora, and she was just learning to crawl. And at one point, Nora was crawling, and she crawled under the table, and she lifted her head up, and she smacked her head on the table, and she started to cry. And I looked over, and Carissa was crying too. Carissa has an ability to sympathize in a way that I just don't. Her pain was aligned with Nora's pain because Carissa understands this. Her heart had gone out to Nora in the moment. Remember, we talked about this last week. Heart, it really is the motivational headquarters of our lives. It's really the hub of all that we are. And Jesus, at the core, his heart is a heart that sympathizes, really empathizes in our language with each of us. Now, when we hear that Jesus is sinless, it's easy to disconnect from that because it's hard to relate to that. But I want to talk about how Jesus actually knows the full weight of temptation in a way that we don't. Over the last few afternoons, over the last few weeks in Utah, there's been some major storms, and I love sitting and watching a good storm. When monsoon season comes, when the winds pick up, we know what that can feel like, to be beaten back by the weather, to be out in the wind. And I want to just ask you a question. Who knows the full strength of the windstorm? Who knows the full strength of the rain? Is it the person who lays down in it? Is it the person who gets out of it as quickly as possible? Or is it the person that persists through it all? Isn't it the one who goes through it, who pushes through it, not the one who lies down in it, who knows the full weight and strength of the storm? This is how it is with Jesus. He was tempted and tested in every way as we are, but he never caved to it, which means he lived through it longer than we ever have, which means he knows the weight of it more than we ever will. Christianity is not idealistic. Jesus stared reality in the face. He stared pain in the face. He knows what it is like to go through that. He knows what it's like to be tempted to use power for your own benefit. He knows what it's like to lust after pleasure and yet refuse it. He knows what it's like to lean towards entitlement and take it, and yet he never did so. The person who lies down in the wind doesn't know the full weight of it. It's the person who never does that truly gets it. And this is what the author of Hebrews is saying. Jesus is like that. He was tempted, tested in every way as we are, yet he never sinned. So he knows what it's like to feel the things you feel. He knows what it's like to face discouragement. And yet in all of it, he never walked away from glorifying God. Now, the author of Hebrews is about to make an incredible point. So because he knows you, he says, you can approach me. You can approach. You can walk towards me. That's where the passage goes next. Let me read that now. Verse 16, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence. Wow. God's throne of grace. We can walk into his presence. In an ancient culture, a king's throne room, it was reserved for only the special of the special, the VIP status. They perhaps could walk into a throne room. Certainly, no poor peasant could. No shameful creature could. But the author of Hebrews is saying this: every Jesus follower can freely approach God with confidence. What a promise. And then the passage goes on, so that we may receive. In these moments when we approach, what is it that we will receive? Mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. So when you show up before God, when you just look up, you begin to talk to him. You walk into a worship experience with him. You open your Bible on your own. You begin a conversation with a friend. You begin to talk to your spouse with vulnerability. And you begin to bring God into all of your life. When you're soaking wet and you're embarrassed and you feel shame, you can still approach. You don't have to get it together first. This is the heart of Christ to the discouraged. He desperately wants us to approach him in those moments. Not hide it from him, not get it together first, but absolutely move towards him, receiving two things, mercy and grace. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. So Jesus will not give you what you deserve. You'll receive mercy, and grace is being given better than you deserve. And we can expect both of those things when we approach God in discouraging seasons. And the author of Hebrews says this, it will help. How will it help? Will it lift me out of my circumstance? No. It will bring God into it. Mercy and grace are comforting in moments like this. The presence of Jesus comforting in moments like this. This is how it will help the first century Christian, and this is how it will help us now. So basically, the author of Hebrews has given us a 4-step process, a 4-step remedy, if you will, to discouragement. And here it is. I want to share that with you. The remedy is this. Number 1 is doctrine. It was the faith. Think about what's true. It's doctrine. Second, it's contemplation. What's true about Jesus now? I want to contemplate who he is. He's safe, he's accessible, and now we can approach. That's the 3rd step. I'm going to approach him with confidence, knowing that he listens when I pray, knowing that he sees me in my pain, knowing that he weeps with me, he sympathizes. He knows what it's like to be me. And 4th, the remedy to discouragement is we'll receive mercy and grace. when we think along these lines in moments of discouragement, the Bible says it will help. Now, I want to talk to the non-Christians for just a moment. SMCC is a place where we want to speak to people who don't believe what we believe, where you have questions and doubts and you're not sure you're in yet. I want to talk to you. Even people who don't follow Jesus know what discouragement is like, and those people have a remedy process as well. I mean, everybody has a path forward in discouragement. I just don't know if it's the right path. I mean, when people are down in discouragement, sometimes the remedy is more sex, more purchases, more love, more money, more drugs, more disconnection and disassociation from the problems that I'm in. There is a remedy for everybody in seasons of discouragement. I think the author of Hebrews gives us the best one. It's not a small dose of medicine. It is a person who understands what it's like to go through what we're going through. What could be better than that? Dane Ortlund, in the book Gentle and Lowly, which has inspired this series, says this. He says, it's not only that Jesus can relieve us from our troubles, like a doctor prescribing medicine. It's also that before any relief comes, he is with us in our troubles, like a doctor who has endured the same disease. This is what the heart of Christ is like for the discouraged. Sometimes in our family, I have this moment that I really treasure with our kids. It happens less and less now that they're older, but it still happens from time to time. Sometimes we'll be on the couch, we'll be watching a movie, or we'll be on the couch reading a book, or I'll be reading a book, and the kids wake up early, and when they do that, they crawl into mom and dad's lap. They crawl into my lap. And in those moments, and I can even think about this the moment they were born, they are so close to us that we can actually feel their heartbeat. Have you ever been in a moment like that where you were so close to somebody that you could feel their heart beating? And those are special moments because they're moments where we physically understand how close we are, but it's a real reminder of how close we are relationally as well. You can feel the heart beat. The author of Hebrews is using all the words that he has, the most powerful words that he has to describe that moment between us and Jesus. That there were people that literally felt the heartbeat of Jesus. That is not us now. But we have these truths packaged in the Bible, packaged in the book of Hebrews to help us understand his heart. And the idea is that it would draw us in so closely that we would feel his heart as he feels ours. And that through that connection, through that closeness, we would find comfort and hope in moments of discouragement. What I want to do in this series and what I want to do as we begin to wrap up today is highlight stories from the Gospels where we see this from Jesus. And there's one really special scene in the Gospel of Luke where this heart of Jesus is really seen. In Luke chapter 7, there's this pericope, which is really just a short scene in the life of Jesus where we see his heart on display. I want to read that to you now. It's Luke 7. I'll start in verse 11. It goes like this. Soon afterward, Jesus has just healed a centurion's servant. And after that, he moves on to another scene. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Those clues, those details are so important in understanding the heart of Jesus here. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart, it went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up, he touched the bier, which is really like a stretcher, something between a stretcher and a coffin or a casket. So he touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearer stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Jesus performs a miracle here. Miracles are possible. There are moments where we see something beyond nature break into nature. If the universe was created out of nothing, then that is a miracle in and of itself. And if that miracle happened, and if the resurrection happened, then miracles like this absolutely can happen as well. Here's what happened next. They were all filled with awe and praise God. A great prophet has appeared among us, they said. God has come to help his people. And this news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. If this was the only story that we had about Jesus, this was the only passage where we saw Jesus lead and love and serve, I think this passage would be enough to know his heart of compassion and love. It would be enough to know his power and his concern for people. It would be enough to know that he's victorious over death. I think this passage, if it was all that we had, would be enough for us to trust Jesus as Lord. Built into this story is a couple interesting things that I want us to see. Not only was this lady grieving, she was now going to be destitute. She had already lost her husband. Remember, she was a widow, and now she had lost her son. In ancient culture, kids were how you were cared for. It was your livelihood. So now she's been placed into poverty because of the situation that she has found herself in. There's professional wailers or mourners. This is a big scene. Jesus risks impurity by reaching out. Only 3 times in the Gospels does Jesus bring somebody back from the dead, and this is one of them. And he gives this mother back her son. Jesus' heart went out to her. The Greek word here is a very interesting word. It's such an important one. It's the Greek word splachnizomai. Try saying that from home. It's why Jesus took notice. It means moved with compassion. Splachna is the Greek word for internal organ. Splachnizomai is to be moved with such compassion. You feel it at a gut level. It is gut level care. It is gut level compassion. It's the ability to feel emotion deeply. And Jesus was moved with compassion deep inside of who he was. His heart, this is how it's translated in English, his heart went out to her. At the deepest level, Jesus was deeply concerned. So what we've seen today is the heart of Jesus for the church suffering in the book of Hebrews. What we've seen is the heart of Jesus, his ability to be moved with compassion for a grieving and destitute mother. And I want you to know that Jesus is still moved with compassion for each one of us. Dane Ortland says it like this: the risen Lord, alive and well in heaven today, is not somehow less approachable and less compassionate than he was when he walked the earth. Jesus knows what it's like to feel what you're feeling. And even though Jesus is in heaven, he embraces us now. So I don't know what's discouraging you, but I want you to think on it for a moment. Perhaps it's a relationship with a family member and they've cut you out, or a friend has cut you out of their life. Perhaps it's a father who pays no attention. Perhaps it's a boss who embarrasses you and neglects caring for you. Perhaps it's a marriage where a spouse is somehow not living up to the promises they once made to you. Whatever it is that's discouraging you in this season, the Bible makes it really clear. And perhaps you've heard it before, but I want it to sink in deeply. Jesus, he is close. He sees us when we're discouraged. He sees us when we're defeated. He sees us when we're in pain. He sees us even when we die. And he comes close. He is moved with compassion. And he's not the superhuman leader or savior that we can't connect with, that we can't relate to. But he understands what it's like to be us. And therefore, we can approach him. We can approach him with confidence, reflecting or contemplating what's true about him, what's true about us, what's true about our salvation. We can expect to receive mercy and grace. Can expect to receive better than we deserve and to not be given that which we do deserve. Mercy and grace, and that can help. So as we wrap up today, I want to give you just a little bit of homework. I want to invite you to consider one emotion that's describing this season for you right now. Perhaps it's a negative one, perhaps it's a positive one. Perhaps it's something like isolation, maybe it's joy. Maybe it's defeat, maybe it's success. I mean, pick an emotion-laden word, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to approach God with it. This is the invitation of the book of Hebrews. Just begin to talk to him. Say, God, I'm feeling this. And Jesus, I know that you felt this as well. God, and even though I feel this, I'm grateful that you're with me in this. I want you to approach him now from wherever you are. Maybe you're running on the treadmill, driving in the car, sitting at home, whatever it is. The invitation is that we can approach him whenever we are, with whatever we are going through. And may you remember, this is what I hope, may you remember Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14, 15, and 16. The remedy for discouragement, which really is Jesus. Would you pray with me? God, I'm grateful that you are God of mercy and grace. I'm grateful for Jesus, who knows what it's like to go through what we go through. And Jesus, I know that there's some people wrestling with some painful emotion and discouragement right now. And I pray that they would think well first, and that feelings over time would follow, that feelings of comfort would come after we reflect on the comforting character that you are. I pray for our church. I pray for SMCC. I pray for each individual suffering and going through something tough right now. God, I pray that they would approach you with confidence. Thank you that you allow for that. And I pray that as we do that together, it would lead us through discouragement. And at the very least, we would just know that you're with us in it. And that would be, as the author of Hebrews says, an incredible help for us. God, would you help us now in our discouragement? We pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
And here I stand before you now, as honestly as I know how. Broken by the days gone by, Spirit held my soul to rise. I try my best, but still I fail. And even then you're with me there. You remind me I'm a child of God, regardless of the things I've done. Oh, my hope is found in perfect love. Your mercy triumphs over judgment. Love wider than horizon, stronger than all sin. Lord, your kindness, it leads us to repentance, to the heart of God. Your heart, oh God, is all I want. Oh, they say that it's impossible to ever save a sinner's soul, but my God says to the prodigal, my beloved one, you're welcome home. Oh, your mercy triumphs over judgment. Love wider than horizon, stronger than all sin. to Jesus I surrender. All to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him. In His presence daily live. Oh, all to Jesus I surrender. All to Him I freely give. Oh, we give it all to You. I will ever love and trust Him. In His presence daily live. Oh, Your mercy triumphs over judgment. Love wider than horizons, stronger than all sin. Oh, Lord, Your kindness, it leads us to repentance, to the heart of God. Your heart, oh God, is all I want.
Thank you, Cam and the band, for leading us in that song and reminding us of the truth of God's kindness and grace. What I'd like to do right now is just to invite you as we wrap up here today to go ahead and leave a comment on this video on YouTube. Maybe you can just give a time when you've been discouraged in the past, or maybe a time when Jesus helped you with that discouragement. I would love to hear from you. And as well, if you would like to help us out in a free and easy way, just do me this one favor. I'll just ask this of you. If you're not already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you are already subscribed, go ahead and leave a like. That helps us reach more people. And if you found this talk on discouragement helpful, please text it to a friend, share it on your social media. Do something to allow somebody else to find this hopeful and helpful message. Next week, we will be back with Pastor Eric as we continue in the Banner of Jesus series and talk about Christ's heart for the excluded. I think you're really going to like it. Thank you for being here again, and I hope to see you again soon.